Chapter 9. The True Reflection. The months to follow were difficult, and in retrospect I found that I still resented how the play of life moved me forward, ousting me from my comfort zones and toward accepting my place among men, unprotected, and now responsible for my own life. I began to accept it, though, and eventually to forget my loss. I apologized to Master Paen. I spent days picking flowers for him, and brought them to him each day until he invited me in his dish. Do you remember what I told you that day by the mountains years back? I lowered my eyes. He raised my chin again and said, Tell me. You said, I will chase after more loves and defend against losing the ones I have. And now do you see that is true, that you are doing that? Yes. You see, Jeshibian, the supreme warrior, sees this tendency in himself all the time, and avoids this mistake because he knows that he is actually no one, only a reflection of eternity. You forgot something else, I told you, though. Something more important, the thing that allows for all of it. Do you remember now? That if I really noticed you, I'll see it all the way you do, I answered. Yes. Don't ever forget that mistake. Otherwise, John D isn't seen and can't be defended against because of your fear of death. It is an important mistake to learn from. Now that you are more humble, I have more to show you. He smiled, winked, and sent me on my way. Thinking only of him, I reflected on what he had to say as I rode back home, and I understood. If I am the Eternal One, then who has lost their mother? I am truly love. Then the future and past are spent in play despite the appearances of birth and death. Who has gone? Who is it that ever dies? The Master was training me to fight for this understanding. He was helping me to see as he did. That sight, achieved only by relying on the Great One, and not on asserting my own self, who only dreams from within the rooms of the selfish point of view. As more years passed to deliver me into my adolescence, my days were spent riding with Dalle, who at age 12 was given his own Mera. He named her White Mane, and she was splendid, her horns long and curled, nearly bone white. She was tan in color, and her tail and mane were vibrantly white, and thus her name. Nanui, by default, became my own Mera. Gray with black horns and dark eyes, she was a dear to me. Together Dalle and I ventured through the jungles of Genia, often engaged seriously in the hunt or traveling in an official capacity along with Minot in his detachment of men, bearing the standard, the twin lightning bolts of Archaea. There was only duty. Our days of reckless adventure in the deep thick were gone. We rode now, stronger, at full gallop, Mera hooves throwing clods of red Archaean mud into the air as rain poured against our strong backs. We were bigger now, nearly grown, and our elder brothers Kuba and Seleth shared their duties with us. Darlian and I now routinely traveled the full perimeter of the entire Khoorhani circle. We rode along the entire outer fence between Tanaga and Kamina, further east to Isiwa, and south to Kushaiti. We even traveled on occasion to the outskirts city of Katik, where Lord Dajai ruled. That year I met all the chiefs personally in their keeps and corresponded with their families, as was expected of me. Though there was peace, the talk of civil war among Khoorhani was rampant. Dar and I wondered which one of the noble lords would be the first to turn, to cede. Tension was mounting as rumors of my father's insanity circulated. Though no one doubted the master, the desperate political maneuvering to oust my father had begun. Consequently, we traveled to the outer cities with entire divisions, our arrival a show of Archaean strength. Then I and Darlian were introduced to the daughters of lords, and talks of marriage proceeded to keep the Khoorhani unified. I was 11 then. My voice was beginning to change, and I was taller, about the same height as Darlian now. It was arranged that Darlian would be married to Lord Tanis's second daughter. It was then arranged that I would be married to his third daughter, who was only 8 years old at the time. I was shocked by this and resented having to marry for political reasons. My father would not relent, however, and only spoke of my marriage in terms of what was good for Archaea. I hated that I and Darlian were Khoorhani Ta's political pawns, and over time the title of prince seemed menial, unimportant, and unchallenging. I wanted freedom. I began again to complain inwardly and dream of a life of dramatic importance, of my own kingdom, if you will. Disturbed, I confessed my feelings to Minot. Give it time. In due time, things will make better sense, Jeshoya, Minot would say. I wanted to be taken seriously, to hold the reins of my own destiny. Why could I not choose whom to marry like my older brothers? Because your father is stingy with the bloodline, Paen cracked. He wants to keep the eldest brothers and their families close to the capital, which makes you the scraps he tosses out for political arrangements. He howled in laughter. Sasojada, the master's devotee, sat next to him in the grass beneath the sun, and they both listened to my complaining. Sasojada laughed as the master teased. Scraps, Tanis will not go for it, Sasojada. Not enough meat. What do you think? Do you see this boy before you as the next prefect lord of Kamina? He should have at least offered Seleth, Sasojada said, his voice gravelly. That would have been more convincing. No, you see, your Ta is desperate and stingy. He never gets how he insults everyone, the master said. And then he looked at me and said, Don't you worry about it, Jeshibian. As if the writing were clearly on the wall for him to see. I had no eyes for it whatsoever. Paen explained later how afraid my father was, how cowardly this gesture of his was. He had no real faith in the peace. He kept the strongest near him and dispatched the young to sink or swim. And he cannot even see that his actions reveal precisely that, Paen said, and then he encouraged me to let all of it go. For you are with me, and always will be, he said. So I then focused much of my potential on victory within Anhenyeg, which I still hadn't been chosen for. I figured that a splendid show of my ambition would speed it all along. I trained with Minot, who taught me fighting techniques late in the evenings. Beginning to take me seriously, he taught me several forms, his best. From Minot, I learned the form of the tiger and the asp. I could twirl the heaviest of scimitars fluidly, and I sparred with my other brothers and competed with them. Then, I actually won contests and moved up in standing. I enjoyed the attention from the young girls now, and I no longer shrank away from the circle. It was not long before I became proud unto conceited. So, now you seem to fit in. What do you want to do now? Master Paen would tease. Do you want to now fight a legion of Mayak single-handedly? Will that inform you of your purpose? Yeah, I mean, to have enough courage to fight a legion, I think. The master threw back his head and laughed. And you are sure of this? He asked. I suppose then you'll want to choose a wife, too. I scowled at not being taken seriously. I want to be like Minot. I want to be brave and strong enough to cleave Mandy and Jandy in two and best 80 warriors like him. Like you, I confessed. The master laughed more. And then he beckoned me to take a seat on the mat he was sitting on. Oh, it sounds like Minot told you all about his precious victories, Yes, I said. Minot then sighed, knowing he was caught. My father, who sat nearby, also laughed. I remained on my feet and exclaimed, He told me all about how you bested 800 men north of the gates, but you were put in prison by Tomok. He then told me that you instructed him to finish your mission. I didn't know that it was Minot who took on my father's Bakuela guards, all 80, and freed you. My father laughed harder, as did Paen. I'm so glad you now have humor about it, Botaj Ta. But is what your son says true in Kosi? The master asked my father. My father lay on his side, grinning. He nodded. All I can say is it was not a proud day for myself, or for my army, he joked. The master laughed loudly and nodded his head. He then sighed. They then seemed like old friends to me. Who did this? I did this? I don't recall it, really. Was that me? Asked Paen, looking as if he were trying to recall a distant memory. Ah, master, that is a good question. I wondered who could manage such a feat. The Ta said. I was darkening internally. If this story was a lie, I would be so angry at Minot, and I looked at him sharply. I protested, still standing. But I read scrolls, testaments of it in the libraries, and gossipers will gossip, the master interrupted, waving his hands. I certainly don't recall doing such things. I'm but a little old man, Paen said. My father laughed even more. Paen then turned to Minot and said, Minot, I had no idea how much fighting skill you had. Why, for you to take on 80 men in Bakuela at that, all by yourself, I am astonished. Paen approached Minot, who was dark with embarrassment. May I touch you, O great prince? The master teased. Bask in your brilliance. Okay, Minot grumbled, so I did not tell it rightly. Jeshibian, the master said. These events have some truth, but there is such a critical omission to Minot's version of the story. And it is an interesting mistake, that omission I keep pointing out to you. I hope you can learn from your brother's mistake here. I finally surrendered and sat on the mat by him, folded my knees into my chest, wrapped my arms around them, and asked, stupidly, "Omission?" "Yes. You see, you've forgotten so quickly already. If you had asked me who it was who defeated your father's army, I would say, not me. I cannot do such a thing like that. I would say, I can only cooperate with what is bigger, better, and more capable than me. And that she did that. She planned it. She made it come to pass. Do you remember Naogi's story?" I smirked, somewhat reluctant to follow the thread, knowing that it would only lead to the master smashing to bits my ideas of how I accomplished rank in the Henyeg, or of how I could accomplish anything. "Do you know what I'm saying to you now, young prince?" "Ashuta," I sighed, giving in and smiling as if the master removed my idea again, a simpleware, and again placed it on his higher shelves from which he might give them to me later when I understood more. "Indeed, and said with such disappointment. He omitted Ashuta. He leaves the divine out of the picture entirely. Only the divine can do something like that. I can only cooperate with her whim. I can only master the art of cooperating with her. The art of humility. I am just an emptied vessel ready to be filled at her whim. An instrument plucked by Ashuta's splendid fingers. So, young Minot, who was it really that moved you that evening that you rushed to claim credit for?" "I told the story out of conceit, master. It was you," Minot said, his eyes lowered. "Yes, and I am no one at all. Just an open field through which the goddess flows. If your attention is on me, then my capacity of perfect surrender, of humility, is extended. Why didn't you tell your brother that you did this? Why do brothers do such a disservice to one another? Put out this fool's gold before them to chase after?" The master only laughed as Minot said nothing. "I know why. To reinforce his idea that he is a great one among others." The master laughed. He leaned forward and looked at me straight. "You see, the great one is the animator and does the doing as it seems to be done. You all forget this. You wish to possess it and control it. It will not work because, in truth, there is no separate you. So, Jeshibian, you want to be like your brother, or rather, what you imagine him to be, instead of being yourself. Noticing what truly is, and going from there. If you would notice what is, and go past the discomforts of seeming to have no purpose, nowhere to run and hide, you might discover something greater about yourself. If you go around wanting to be like someone else at the expense of being yourself, then how are you any different from the first brothers Khoorhani and Mayakti? How will this spell of separateness that has you sewn up ever be broken? The search for yourself, Jeshibian, is absolutely false, I tell you." I nodded. When will you stop putting mud on yourself to be like the swamp? When will you stop drowning yourself in the lake to be like a fish? And when you are in the lake as a dissatisfied fish, when will you notice how you fantasize about being dry and standing as a man? The grass is only as green as your willingness to love truth to its core. So what? You are still afraid of death, of the snake that killed your mother. I would be frightened of her as well. You are not here to be grand and untouchable, comfortable and pampered, but rather humble, human, and vulnerable, and above all that, mortal. And why? Because you are here to face death. You will get brave because bravery is in you and must come out according to God, not because it should suit your vanity and make you feel good about yourself, but because you need to face your death. It is no instant thing, Jeshibian. Though you are still a bit sad that you miss Khoorhani, your brother is at least right that in time you will be ready to let go of it all, of all of this. Go now, Khoorhani, and ride. Forget about being so serious and demanding that God make you something else. I simply was as unoriginal as a master pointed out to me when I was younger. Being called Khoorhani by Paen made me sad with disappointment in myself. I just did not understand, and knowing that I did not understand, my master only told me not to worry, that I would begin to see for myself. He would be there for me once I did begin to understand, and unbeknownst to me at the time, he would give me everything so that I would see. And so I did ride with Dalle through the jungles, forgetting my disappointments as I made friends with whom I laughed and struggled. Dalle and I grew closer. We laughed and struggled to be straight with one another. The years seemed to fly by, and soon I was 12. Still, though, I would not forget my ambitions entirely. I found myself still wanting a sign, wanting adventure. I continued to practice the rites, attained rank in the Enhenyeg, and soon, Minot initiated me into manhood. I knew that he would choose me for his group, but only after I showed him I was not taking it for granted that he would choose me, regardless, by performing all my duties better than anyone else. In celebration, I slaughtered a goat and we ate it, and that night a giant drum circle was held. The circle of girls anointed me with ash, and each one kissed my cheek as I walked among them, my face painted red around the eyes, large palm leaves tied to my hair. Naked, I passed through a wall of palms and was presented to my father, who sat next to the master. As was customary, I lay flat on my face to the tile floor, and my hands held up to receive a weapon to signify my rank as a warrior. Usually, the one who chose the boy from the circle presented him with his first weapon, a dagger or a short sword. I expected to receive this from Minot. Into my hands was placed not a dagger, but a sword. The feel like a scimitar, a weapon worn by a fully grown warrior. Still lying face down, I opened my eyes and lifted my head, surprised by the weight of it. The scabbard was jeweled with complexities unimaginable. I had to blink my eyes before falling into a trance. It was quiet in my father's court, everyone as surprised as I was. Was this a joke? I rose to my knees, swallowed, and struggled to straighten myself, my eyes fixed to the brilliance placed in my hands. It was curved, the handle of white beads, turquoids, and diamonds. There was a murmur. Everyone knew this blade. Do you recognize the warrior before you? Paen asked Minot, who grinned proudly at me. I recognize him, Minot said, and he beckoned me to stand. It was my father who usually initiated the warrior, not Paen. Paen typically never had anything to do with these ceremonies. Jeshibian, the master said, his eyes ablaze, his gaze burning into me. This is my reflection, Mahabharata. Never forget her. This is your duty. Do this and you will see the face of God in all beings. This is what a true warrior does. Never forget your duty, warrior. I trembled. I was holding the master's very own weapon. I looked into the eyes of Paen. My head felt full, my attention focused. I looked back, down at the sword unbelievingly. I will not forget, Master, I said. Such a gift. The Master's very own Mahabharata. I trembled beneath its weight. I never expected to see it twice, let alone hold it, and much less have it presented to me. My arms shook, holding the weapon. I was in shock. The Master nodded for me to unsheath it. I pulled the white leather scabbard apart from the handle, and with a chime, Mahabharata glided out. It was like the sun rising as she slid out of the sheath. The blade vibrated, rang, and shone with white light. The room was alight with her. The master nodded and winked at me. I loved the master, and Mahabharata betrayed my love for him as she glowed, getting brighter. Khoorhrhani rose and held his hands up, and everyone cheered. That was the day the master made me a man. In truth, Mahabharata, the master sword, was given to him by the goddess Ashuta. He told me that it was his reflection of loving her. He said that to look at Ashuta's face, to wield her blade rightly, you must let go of yourself entirely. When Master Paen held it, Mahabharata's light was blindingly white, so hot that those who beheld it could even disappear. That is what he told me. He told me that to behold such purity would disintegrate one's ego, outshine it. I was dumbfounded as to why he gave me that sword. What did it mean? I could not understand at the time, but beloved Master Paen loved me so perfectly that he would give her to me, so that if I could not let go of my fantasies, he would walk me through the halls of those fantasies, guiding me to the truth. What? You want I should take Mahabharata back? Suddenly, you don't want to stand for anything real? No, Master, it's just that everyone is jealous and thinks I'm so unworthy. And yet I think I am, and it makes me feel strange, I said. Ah, I see, but you always feel strange. If you would but notice, and it's not your unworthiness that has you feeling this way. That quip stung, but the master quickly moved on to other points. You assume that everyone was not jealous before you ever held Mahabharata. Everyone is jealous all the time, Jeshibian, and angry all the time, and sad all the time. Mahabharata did not make this happen, nor did my giving her to you. Mahabharata, which is my reflection, only made this world, and this dream of it more obvious to you. I did not think of that. I was quiet for some time as I stared off into the distance. Days later, we rode into the jungle, I on Nui and the master on Kwanan. Mahabharata is not only my reflection, but a reflection of what is truly seen. It makes you uncomfortable to see what is really happening here, doesn't it? It scares you, doesn't it? Yes, I could not argue. I could not escape the sense of humanity's frustration and the fact humanity is woefully lost. I could not escape my own feelings of disappointment, anger, and humiliation. Why does it scare you? Master Paen asked. I had only had the sword a week and already saw so much. Everyone is really unhappy, but no one addresses it. And? There's nothing in this world that grants lasting happiness or meaning, and only persists to goad us as something, or things, or people to desire, to covet, I began. To be jealous of? And that is why being a Khoorhani prince seems only to be an empty title to you, doesn't it? Paen asked. Yes, I said. And that is why you are scared. Because along with the rest of humanity, you know that beyond transcending yourself, there is nothing to ever be happy about. Depressing, Yes, I sighed. Good. Well, you must look deeper, my young prince. There is more to see. If you look, you will see there is a choice you can make. To know the truth and accept it or not accept it. With truth there is hope to transcend this nightmare, as I have. And without it, well, it gets worse, and you will feel more tightly hemmed in. I carried Mahabharata with me all the time and never forgot that she was in my care. Or perhaps the other way around. I strapped her to Nanui's side and would go to the woods just outside our dish and unsheath her. She responded to me, glowing brightly. One night, alone in the room I shared with my brothers, I looked into the blade to see my reflection, but no one was there. I turned her over and looked at the other side. Still, no reflection. I must be doing something wrong, I said to myself. There's no reflection because you're really no one, Jeshibian. Minot told me, having stepped into the room without my hearing him. You take that back, Minot, I said, and stood over him in a rage. I was a warrior, after all. Calm down, let me explain. But before he could, Botaj entered our room. The air seemed to compress with his depression. As he walked by, he grabbed Mahabharata from me and unsheathed her. It did not glow, but there was Botaj's ugly face staring back at him, clear as day. He bared his teeth, the better to see them, and then he sucked them clean and belched. I see my reflection. I guess Minot's right. You are nobody, he said, and then tossed the sword back to me. He went over to his mat to remove his armor and helmet, and instantly fell asleep. Botaj, Minot growled, as I ran out of the room in a panic. I rode to the master's dish. He was drinking tea and waited outside the entrance. Jeshibian, he called affectionately. What brings you at this hour? Take Mahabharata back, please, I cried. Why? He asked. Because I want to be somebody, I pleaded, somehow feeling that Mahabharata was a death sentence. I didn't want to die. But you are somebody. You are Jeshibian Khoorhani, the young prince who has 5 brothers and a sister he loves dearly. You are Jeshibian, Minot's favorite brother. You are Jeshibian, who we sometimes call Jeshibian because we love him so much even though he hates that nickname. You are Jeshibian, who is so thirsty to know who he really is that the sword of truth tells him exactly that. The truth of who he is. The master chuckled His eyebrows were wild above his large, beaming eyes and wry smile as he approached me. You, a Jeshibian Khoorhani who wants to be a real warrior, Since that is what he wants, how can a warrior who is no one in particular be a warrior at all? I still did not understand. I was offended and shook my head. How could I be nothing? How could that be true? How could that be acceptable? The master took Mahabharata from me and unsheathed her. The glow was indescribable. When it subsided, he walked over to me and lowered her to show me that there was no reflection of him either. What could this mean? Why, I am the master warrior even, and yet I am revealed to be no one as well. I guess I should get depressed, Perhaps we can be drinking partners, Paen mused, poking me with an elbow. Does all this mean you cannot play your part as all those other things? The boy prince, soon to be a great warrior, etc., etc., and that you just should contract heavily upon yourself in self-doubt and not accept it? Why, if I, master warrior, etc., etc., can accept the same information about myself being nothing, no one at all, and still play the part of Paen, who is happy, who is kind and loves you dearly, what is it about you that has you holding back in such doubt? My boy, why not play in love? He said. And with that, I dropped my head into my hands and wept happily. Finally getting his joke, this wild prank he was playing on me. All was given, but nothing meant anything. Even my own appearance, my newly recognized status, and the stages previous to it. The master would give me his very own sword to show me how meaningless it all was. Needless to say, I calmed down eventually, the master laughing at me between sips of tea, his eyes dark crazy orbs beneath his thick eyebrows. He sheathed Mahabharata, handed her back to me, and then brought me tea, and we sat in his home. I sat in silence contemplating him, wondering, who are you? I did not leave until morning. When I carried Mahabharata on my travels with Dalle, I watched the world with different eyes. It seemed clear to me that everyone is asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking how I could be nothing, I could have been asking how I could be something. Potage, my brother, assumed and believed in his somethingness with the greatest conviction. He had little or no thirst for the truth that lay beyond that assertion, and so he appeared clearly along Mahabharata's length. There was absolutely no question of it. What do I believe then? I asked myself. Am I Jeshibian? Am I light? Life suddenly began to take on a different journey. I became more comfortable, and my quiet nature had realized how my worriment was basically my demands eclipsing the very freedom that Paen showed me as my true nature. And so, from time to time, I enjoyed this glimpse of Paen's quiet spaces where no one existed to register a complaint against the world. Who is uncomfortable, anyhow? We fished one day. Yes, you believe if you're uncomfortable, it is somehow linked to your not being yourself, the master howled, recasting his line from the riverbank. How can you be yourself, really? Have you figured that out? What self are you being other than the one who is alive in the midst of an uncomfortable real life? Who do you find when you are in fact comfortable and only getting what you want? The same one who is there when you're uncomfortable. No one. The only thing you can do is be mindful and accept the terms of real life. Otherwise, you manufacture the who and his entitlement to the comfort, the master told me. But you once told me to be myself as is, I challenged him. True, but the self, not the self. He gestured to accompany the words, his arms first spread wide and then barely spread apart. There is a difference. The one I refer to is the superior, all-pervading one that stands before the person you dream of as yourself. The one that seeks as though something stands apart from him. The one I implore you to be is the same one that I am. Are you ever uncomfortable? I asked. All the time. This experience of form is mainly bothersome, and being among those hopelessly bound to the ego does not make for good company. Master, what do you do that you're so happy? Jeshibian, he said. In life, there's only doing your duty to ensure survival and to cooperate with the others here. Happiness is already happening if you would only notice it. Do your duty, and do not make your ordinary life obligated to fulfill you. It will not work, trust me. I appear only to serve a function. I only do my duty. So for me, happiness is already the case, independent of experience. What is your function, Master? To clue you in on the truth. That no one is anyone? I asked. That there is no one in any world who is not God already, now, and at this instant, that no speck of dust, mouse, mite, beetle, bird, monkey, mango, fish, person, man or woman, rich or royal, has been abandoned, forsaken, or forgotten. It is all me, my bright sphere, all God, all love. He told me more about his enlightenment, about what it takes to see with diamond eyes as he did. I only wanted to be with him. He would send me back home, though. One night he said, "Keep Mahabharata for as long as you like, and do not worry about anything, ever. Your attractions will move you and guide you. I am always there." I did not know what that meant, but I felt that this was only the beginning, the tip of the iceberg of what he had to show me.